If anybody has any questions now, happy to answer any of those.
I do, yeah. You were just a little bit ago, you were talking about how the listing changed. Here about 2 months ago, we sent in a bunch of product in one specific category where it was I'll just say it was a pack of 3. I don't remember exactly what it was. My wife's very detailed about that, and like a week later, 2 weeks later, we got 2 complaints back from customers saying that, this is supposed to be, again, I'll make it up, a 6-pack or a 9-pack, and it just caught us completely off guard, because we know the listing wasn't that way when we first put it in, but a week later, 2 weeks later, somebody changed it, whoever, I don't even know who can change it other than the person that made it.
Almost anybody.
So we got a couple of bad reviews, we took care of those customers, and I think we got some positive feedback from those customers, and then we removed the rest of the product from that listing.
It's a challenging situation. It happens all the time, and it's kind of the wild, wild west, because Amazon makes it wide open where basically anybody can change the listing, anybody can pile on a listing, even if you're brand registered, somebody can jump on your listing because they don't gate it the way they should. I think they should gate the listings and just give people, the opportunity to become ungated in specific products or categories or individual ASINs. In a situation like that, all you can do is monitor your listings. All you can do is make sure that something hasn't changed, because it's basically no fault of your own if something, it was a 2-pack and it became a 12-pack or whatever. I've seen that happen so many times. I send in a black shoe and it gets listed on Amazon as a white shoe because somebody changed it. And so you can just imagine how bad that buyer experience is when, hey, I'm going to go order this white shoe and I get a black one. I mean, Amazon doesn't do anything to prevent that. And in fact, they used to have a system where they would let you know of changes to the ASINs, ASIN change notification system, and that's essentially what my software does, is it gives you the ability to monitor all of the listings in your inventory so that you can make sure that when there is a change or a specific type of change that you can be aware of that immediately. You could go in and just take specific action. You could close the listing. You could recall the inventory, you could change the listing, you could try to watch it and see if somebody's going to continue to make changes. Eventually you'll figure out, hey, is this being changed back and forth and it's kind of a tug of war? In which case you don't want to have to beat your head against the wall and fight somebody for that, because they're going to probably continually change it back. So you want to be careful in a situation like that. But about all you can do is monitor your listings. In the back. Yeah.
Generally, from your experience, what Amazon's looking for? Because I'm sure a lot of them have submitted plans of action like, this is everything, and they're like, no, not enough information.
A lot of the time when they say not enough information, you really didn't have enough information. But a lot of the time they can say that, and you could be rejected simply because your plan was not in the right format. So that's one thing that I definitely address in the book, is you want to make sure that whatever you tell them is in the right format. So normally that would be your root cause. And in order to find your root cause, I've got a whole chapter dedicated to how do you find the root cause. Because you can't really write an effective plan of action unless you know what caused the problem. So that's the first place. Then after you have a well-developed root cause, which to me is usually only a paragraph or so, then you would say what we've done to fix the problem. Amazon wants to know you've taken ownership, and what have you done to fix it? And then there's another section, what have you done to prevent this from happening again? You cover all those things in your plan, and usually you'll be in a much better situation. When they ask you for more information, I've seen a lot of advice, and it's difficult to sort of combat this because you hear it all the time, especially on Facebook, and you're dealing with the wisdom of the crowd, and they say, oh, just keep sending it in. That's not normally good advice. Occasionally it is. Occasionally you get a different rep and they'll consider it differently. But for me, by the time somebody sent in the same insufficient plan 4 times, it makes it a lot more difficult for me to unravel. It's probably going to end up costing you more because it's going to be a bigger pain for me to fix. So as far as more information, a lot of the time they're looking for you to have a well-developed root cause that's different than what you've said, or maybe they've got in mind that you've done something differently than what you thought you did. A lot of that will again be uncovered in multiple different places in your account that you have to go to, at least 5 different places that you can go and find the root cause and then be able to develop your whole entire plan around that. Ma'am?
What are those 5 places you would look?
Let me get to that in a second. Let me get your question real quick. Yes?
Are they compliant? Lately, I've gotten a lot of requests for compliance documents for like safety, and I was just wondering if you had anything or if the book covered that more.
I don't talk about compliance issues like CPC or that kind of thing, especially for toys. In some cases, it makes sense just to stop selling that particular ASIN. That's what a lot of people have found related to toys and related to some sort of supplements. In some cases, you can get that type of certification from the manufacturer directly. In some cases, if it's a good enough product for you and selling well enough, you can pay for it yourself and get that type of certification to provide. That's more of a rarer instance. The 5 places. So the first place I always look is in your FBA customer returns. Most of the time when the buyer complains, they'll leave that information about why they're upset in a little note that shows up in your FBA customer return. So if you go to reports, and this is only for FBA, if you go to the information shows up in a different place for merchant fulfilled, but for FBA, you go to reports at the top of the page, and I think they just changed the menu. And then you go to fulfillment, and then on the far left, about 3/4 of the way down the page, there's customer concessions, and then FBA customer returns. And in there, if you look by your ASIN, and then if you look by a date range of, let's say, the last 30 days, normally it'll pull up a spreadsheet, and you go to the far right of that spreadsheet and it'll say return reason. That's where you will find a lot of the smoking guns for the root cause. They didn't used to give you that information. I was on the phone with a lady who had been working at Amazon for 4 years, and she was in the FBA department, and she was pretty knowledgeable, like more so than most of the people you talk to on the phone at Amazon. I said, hey, can you take suggestions? And during the course of that conversation, I said, I know that you know what these reasons are, but you don't give them to us, and there's no reason not to. There's a place right here in this report, and you could be telling us this information. All you got to do is hot link it and provide more detail, and they started to do that. And it made my life a whole lot easier, and I'm sure it was a game changer for a lot of sellers as well, to finally be able to see in some instances, okay, what's the problem? Sir?
I heard you said you have a separate account, more than one account.
I have a second authorized account.
What was the criteria to set up that second authorized account? Because we looked into that, and it was going to require literally setting up a completely separate business.
That's pretty much what you have to do.
Corporate address, everything.
That's pretty much what you have to do. I had a separate address, separate bank account. They want you to use everything separate, like it's a completely separate business, but then they authorize you to operate a second account. They want you to sell a different category. They don't want you selling the same products on both accounts. And
It just seems very short-sighted to say that you can't share warehouse space, for example.
yeah, I mean, I share warehouse space with somebody who is paying me to help them to learn to sell on Amazon. It makes me a little bit, queasy, but I'm sure it'll be fine. It's could be difficult to explain, but it should be straightforward as well. You don't want to necessarily put yourself in that situation if you don't have to. Right here.
I know this isn't a private label course, but I've always heard people talk about when you're doing private label to set up a second account to keep it away from your RA account or whatever. Is that what yours is for, or is that normal procedure?
I opened my second account without it being authorized. And I was sweating bullets for a long time until I finally brought it into compliance. I was like, what do I do? and I wrote them and requested permission, and I felt like I was, got out of jail free for not being suspended, but admitting that I had the second account. When it comes to private label, I think it makes all kinds of sense to have an additional account, because if, like a lot of sellers, you're looking to be able to divest yourself of that and spin it off, sell it. I mean, right now is a great, incredible opportunity. If you've got a specific product or product line, you could build that up, make it profitable, and within a year or 2 or 3 years, you could spin that off and rinse and repeat. It makes it a lot easier if you have it set up that way from the beginning. Leanna?
I have 2 separate accounts that I got authorized, but as long as Amazon knows what you're operating, because I let them know that I have the same address, but we're operating separately, and that we were on a network with the same IP. I gave the IP, I shared the address, but separate account, separate banking, but same address, same IP. They approved me, and I have had no issues.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's how you want it to be.
That's how you want it. You just need to let them know. It's doing it behind their back and then any surprises and have it open is far better. And they look at you. I have no
Yeah,
issues. And I've had it for 5 years.
it's much better to do it in the light of day. Sir?
You may already covered it, but I can write about your book that is, I think, online. How do I find it?
You can just go to Amazon and look up Amazon Plans of Action,
Okay.
and you'll take you right to it. And right now, it's #1 in the category, so hopefully it'll stay that way. I would appreciate any reviews that you might leave. That's enormously beneficial.
Do you think that this is all I need, or is sufficient to take care of IP complaint, like 1 or 2 IP complaints, simple?
I touch on IP complaints in the course that just recently released. You can sign up here at the conference. I don't touch on IP complaints very much in the book, so I would not say it would be an exhaustive resource for IP complaints. Sir?
How much does the IPI score play into your account health? Are there any tips that you know to increase it?
I hate to tell you, I'm not an IPI expert. I don't pay much attention to it, so that's how much it shows up on my radar. It may affect some people in terms of something outlandish that might happen, but I don't see it in the work that I do.
For me, as my score has gone down, I've seen my quantity limits go down. So
Yeah.
now I'm running up into quantity limits.
I mean, a lot of the time, I would assume that that's related to a number of different other aspects of your account. It may or may not be related to account health. It might be related to, your sell-through. So I wouldn't look at that specifically as account health related issue. In the back?
We recently got an account notification when a customer complained that we sent something expired, but it's the first time we ever sold it, and the expiration date is years away. So I'm trying to figure out how to submit a POA that makes Amazon happy without saying, I'll never sell this again, this is all our fault, because from everything I've been able to find, it shouldn't have been a complaint. Do you have any insights on how to make them happy without shutting down, something that wasn't actually an error?
Was it individually labeled?
I think it was like, 1 or 2 pack of something. I can.
Did you have a date label on there?
Yeah.
Okay, because I have seen that happen quite a bit, where a customer will receive it, but it didn't have a date label on there, and so they get confused because it'll be, a different format than what they're expecting. And so you want to make sure that the label is clear in terms of explaining what the date actually is. But in terms of trying to get that cleared without saying I won't sell it again, that's what I normally try to do. That's what I would hope to do, unless you don't care about it. It's a lot easier to just not sell it again, but you still need to tell Amazon how you'll prevent that same thing from happening with another product. You've still got to identify, why did a buyer say that there was a problem with that particular product? And as soon as you're able to identify that and give Amazon a list of the things that you're going to be doing differently, you could be talking about, we have a first in, first out policy. We manage our expiration dates and pay a lot of attention to that. Repeat some of their policy back to them. If you've gone in and studied the expiration date policy and the rules related to that, tell them what you're doing in terms of inspection, telling them what you're doing in terms of labeling and how you're following the policy, all that kind of thing. You got to give them a list of 5 different things that you're doing or that you've trained your staff to do to avoid those types of issues in the first place. But before I would do any of that, I would go and see if you could figure out what the complaint was that drove that.
With violations that get on your account, like whether it be IP or trademark or whatever the case may be, if you, like I got an IP complaint for a cereal recently, I think it was Kellogg's or something like that, where they, complained about using a picture. When I wrote them, I included a receipt, I annotated it, I did all that, and it basically came back to the generic email like, we need more information. So the defect is still on there, but I guess what I'm wondering is it better to at least show that I tried to address that than obviously just leaving it? And I mean, I feel like I kind of included everything in there. I'm sure I missed something obviously, but is that a point where I come to a person, like yourself, or do you recommend just trying to send it in a differently worded way? Or
I feel like some of the brands are more difficult. Like, Kellogg's is now making complaints on the platform. Target is now making complaints about Target products. Walmart is making complaints about Great Value products. And it's not that it happens all the time, but it happens enough that it would make me want to avoid selling a lot of those types of products. And of course, in the future, I wouldn't want to source any other Kellogg's, and I would want to tell them, hey, I'm no longer carrying that particular product. But the chances are really good you're not going to get a retraction. That's one of the first things that you want to do when you have an IP complaint is reach out to the person who complained and see if you can get a retraction. That's the fastest, easiest path, in my opinion, to be able to get that complaint removed from your account. But in your case, you might have to reword it a couple of different times. You might have to demonstrate the extent that you've gone to try to reach out to the rights owner. You'd want to switch it up. Definitely don't keep sending the same thing back, but I would also say, hey, it's a good thing that you are being proactive about it. It's a good thing that you are responding to them and letting them know that you're trying to take care of it and pay attention to that type of thing on your account.
after, I think they last 180 days. I'm more from the eBay side of things. I know over there, like copyright infringements last 90 days, trademarks, parallel import violations last 180. Is that a similar thing with Amazon, where after that 6-month period it falls off? Because I know it disappears from account health. Does that mean it quits affecting anything on your account, or is that still kind of in their back-end system where they'll count it against you later?
It's still in their back-end system, but I feel like it falls off from counting against you. It's basically a rolling 6 months.
Okay.
And even in some cases, even if you get the account where they tell you that, hey, you've satisfied us, this isn't a problem anymore, or you may continue to sell it. Even in situations like that, the blemish may remain on your account for 6 months. Even though they've told you that it's been removed, it still shows up there. I don't necessarily trust the measurement that they give you, the gauge to say at risk. I've seen accounts slide into at risk, and there's not really any greater risk. It's just a broken gauge. You have the feel for what's going on with your account if you're paying attention to performance notifications and looking at your account health dashboard on a daily basis. That will give you a much better understanding of what the situation actually is, because they're not sitting there with a hair trigger most of the time. It's different for different accounts. There might be 6 different types of accounts or different situations. I had a client who was doing $12 million in volume, and he had 60 different IP complaints on the account. I had another client who was doing, he'd been on the platform since 2008, and he had 80 different complaints, IP complaints on his account. And he's like, I don't pay any attention to those, but it gave me a heart attack for him.
Was he doing the same volume, the guy with 80 versus 60?
Nah, he was only doing $1 million. but he still had a little bit of buffer. Amazon gives him more trust because he's had this account continuously since 2008. It's never been suspended. They give this other guy, the $12 million seller, they give him more trust, because of the fact that he's doing a lot of volume and has very few complaints. Ma'am?
That's what I was gonna ask. How do you know how much trust you're getting if your IP scores and what you go by? How are you knowing that?
It kind of depends on if you're a brand new seller or not. If you're a brand new seller, an IP complaint could be a really big problem. If you're a really low volume seller, an IP complaint could be a really big problem. For one seller, an IP complaint could take them down. For a different seller, they might be able to get 5 and still sleep well at night.
What do you think the future is legally surrounding IP complaints? Because the majority of them are bogus. It's just kind of bullying tactics, right? So is there any legal things that you've heard of around that?
I talked to an attorney about that this morning, that kind of very question. I said, why doesn't Amazon fix this? Why don't they make a complainant, testify that this is a real business with a real complaint, and we're lodging this, and maybe even charge them $500 to lodge the complaint, to make sure that the person who's complaining is able to be reached and to make sure that it's legitimate. I wish they would do that. I don't know if they ever will. To me, IP complaints are horrible. They're like the biggest Achilles heel.
If somebody reaches out to you as if they're another buyer, and they give you an attachment with some kind of a letter.
You mean if I reach out to you
Let's
and...
say I have a listing,
Okay.
and I'm selling somebody else's product, and somebody who says they're the rights owner contacts me as if they're a buyer with an attached letter that looks like a legal letter that they probably want to send me in the mail, but they didn't get around to doing that. Do I really need to pay much attention to that?
A lot of, like if you're looking at the wisdom of the crowd on Facebook, a lot of the time they'll tell you, oh, don't worry about it. Tell them to pound sand. I wouldn't pay any attention to that type of complaint until Amazon gets a hold of me, and then it becomes real. I don't feel that way. I think a lot of the time that, like for instance, if I was going to file a complaint, you're on my listing. I don't want you on my listing. I had this situation. I started a number of different ASINs that I created the first time, and I didn't go through the proper process of getting brand registered, and I didn't go through the proper process of making sure that I had it branded right. I just jumped kind of on there and made it happen, and those listings sold well. But other people jumped on, and I was never going to go file a complaint and try to kick other people off. I wasn't willing to do that. But if I had, I would have contacted you some other way besides contacting Amazon to try to get you kicked off. Because my goal would just be to tell you, hey, this is my listing and I don't want you on there, instead of getting your account suspended. I think that would be completely unreasonable, unfair. So you've got to consider that some people are just trying to give you a heads up. Hey, we don't want to take action, but we want you to know that this is our listing and we want you off of there. And in a situation like that, I would look at their response, look at their message to you and see, hey, are they a legitimate, entity? Are they a legitimate business? Is this their listing? I'd try to read the writing on the wall and get off the listing and avoid all the headaches and complaints.
Just to piggyback on that, usually what I do is I ask them for a phone number and email address of someone inside the company.
Yeah.
The .com.
Try to vet them a little bit.
Make sure it's legit.
Yeah. See if they'll respond. See if they are legit. I would use that. Maybe take it up a notch instead of just hair trigger, get off the listing. Maybe see if they are real. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to respond to you. There's always that possibility.
Just from the perspective of a brand owner, I deal with this, on a relatively routine basis, and I will contact sellers via their accounts. I don't bother trying to track you down, and I'm going to send you a letter that says cease and desist. If you don't cease and desist, the next time I'm going to track you down, and then I'm going to say cease and desist. If you still don't cease and desist, then I'm going to send my lawyer in, and we're going to sue you. property is that sellers will devalue, you know, for example, a trademark. And that's real money that we're talking about. And it's like people that buy stuff, you know, the arbitrage thing. Some people buy stuff and they'll drop the price on a brand. And you'll see the bigger brands are now, they're going after this stuff aggressively. You also see that, I had a friend, for example, ended up spending $75,000 because he pulled a photo off the web to use in an ad. And someone saw that ad, and it was their photo, and they got a lawyer in New York, and the lawyer works on contingency, and that was all she wrote. So be very careful with intellectual property. Your best bet is if somebody contacts you, vet them, find out, you know, are they the intellectual property owner? You know, if you're dealing with a trademark, you can go to USPTO, which is the U.S. Purchase and Trademark Offices. You can search the trademark, and it will provide you with the address of the trademark owner. And then you can contact them directly to figure out, okay, is this bogus or is this just some competitor who's trying to scare me?
The reality is, and Jimmy provides training on this, I'm pretty sure, Jimmy Smith in the back, and there are certain cues that you would be looking for as a seller to determine whether or not this is somebody's private label listing, and you want to stay off of those. Any other questions? Thank you all so much. I'll be at the booth in the back.